Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome back to another video. And since it's Friday, it's time to do another market update and forecast. Now, as some of you know, if you have read my post, I have had the pleasure of taking a 1.5 day vacation and going up to Northern California, up the 99, and then back on the 101, back to Southern California. And of course, I made some videos of the farmlands because I know we're all patiently waiting for that produce season. We're reading about a ton of scary things that produce season is not going to happen because everything's underwater. So I decided to see for myself, make some videos, and I will attach them in this video. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I teach about the trucking industry with a heavy focus on the spot market as well as freight market analysis. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe down below. Now, a quick reminder, this Sunday I am doing a live Q&A again. So if you have any questions about the industry, you know where to find me. I will be on at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Anyway, guys, let's get into the data and see what's going on in the trucking market right now. Ready? Let's go. All right, guys, as always, we start with the general market overview, what is going on in the trucking market, and then we start narrowing it down. So we're going to start with the outbound tender volumes versus rejections. Volumes, this blue line shows us how much freight there is in the market. The white line, the tender rejection line, shows us how much freight is being rejected by contract carriers and ending up on the spot market. The higher this white line is, the more volume is ending up on the spot market and therefore driving rates up. If it's lower, it's the opposite. So let's take a look. So here we have from the 15th to today. And the first thing we can see is that volumes since last week have gone up. Look at that. They skyrocketed. Why? I'm not 100% sure what happened, but one of the things that makes me really happy and hopeful is the fact that tender rejection rates, which is this white line right here, they are higher than last week. Currently, tender rejections are still extremely low at 2.85%, which means that only 2.85% of contract freight is actually ending up on the spot market. So it's still way too low. Just as a reminder, during the boom of 2021, that tender rejection rate was around 20-some%. So yeah, the spot rates are not going to be anything crazy, but at least it's not going below this point. We shall see what happens. If you're wondering whether we have hit bottom yet, I don't know. At this point, I have no idea. The market is doing something crazy. But now let's go ahead and look at the equipment specific tender rejection rates. Yikes, look at that. Okay, so here we go. This chart shows us how much tender rejections have changed for each equipment type since last week, right? Since Friday of last week. The blue line is the flatbed rejection rates. The green line is the van and the orange is the reefer. So we can see from last week, flatbed rejections actually increased by 27.1%. And something that I'm noticing with flatbed week after week, one week it's going to increase like crazy. The next week it's going to decrease like crazy. So it has this kind of peaks and valleys pattern on a weekly basis. Reefers, the orange, they actually decreased by 0.3% since last week. And vans decreased by 1.5% since last week. Vans and reefers don't have such crazy increases and decreases as flatbeds do. Now let's take a look at the National Truckload Index line haul only. What is this? This shows us the average spot market rate based on drivein data without fuel surcharge, line haul only. And what we can see is currently we are at 1.57, so $1.57 per mile. This is the average spot market rate without fuel surcharge. It decreased by 1 cent since last week, which is a bummer. Those rates are still, the spot rates are still going down. And of course, this means, as I say, week after week, the amount of money you make in the industry keeps decreasing compared to the operating costs, right? So the cost of operating a truck is higher than the rate per mile you get on the load board. What does this mean? Well, logically, it should mean that carriers should start exiting the market because they are losing money on every mile that they run. Has it happened yet? Not quite yet. Finally, let's take a look at the contract versus spot spread. Now, someone asked me about this, and I'll tell you, this baseline right here that's close to the 30-cent mark, it's something that I can change, right? It's something that lets me compare to prior years. So this doesn't have any significance really. Now, the reason I left it here is because we had the boom of the 2020 through the beginning of 2022. So that is kind of an outlier. So I'm comparing to what happened before then. Now, what does it show us? Well, the spread increased since the video I made on Monday. We are now at a 90-cent spread, which means that on average, contract freight pays 90 cents more than the spot market. This means that contract rates still have a long way to go to drop down, right? And of course, this also means if the spread is so big, contract carriers do not have a better alternative on the spot market. So they're not going to be rejecting as much contract freight for a better alternative, right? Because they're making on average 90 cents more per mile than the spot carrier. Okay, now on to specifics, starting with flatbeds. As a reminder, I have access to the truck stop load board, which comes with this beautiful spread, which shows us how many trucks versus loads there are in a particular market area. Now here it's for all equipment types, including specialized, but we're going to be focusing on the flatbed. So this column shows us how many loads are being picked up. What is the outbound volume like in a particular state, not market area, state. This shows us how many loads are dropping off, how many trucks are entering that state. And what we want to see to determine whether it's a good area or a bad area is to see more outbound loads for flatbeds than inbound trucks to create that lack of capacity, right? So you can negotiate higher rates. So what we can see for the western states, California, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington all have more loads picking up than trucks going in. Now, I haven't checked the load board today, but from what I remember, the western states in general, yeah, these market areas, they have more volume than there is capacity, which is good. But it's very hard to get out of the West Coast once you enter, right? So from California, you might get a wonderful rate per mile to somewhere like Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and you'll get stuck there. There is no good rate, from what I remember, going out of the western states. Now, in terms of the plain states, there is not a single area where there is more outbound volume than inbound trucks. So that means there is not much negotiating power here. In the Midwestern states, it looks like Illinois and Minnesota are the only two states where there is more outbound volume than there are inbound trucks. These are the only two places where you can actually negotiate. Does that mean that you're not going to have any luck in Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan? No, not necessarily true, but if you're looking at the big picture and trying to figure out where you're going to have the most luck, in the Midwest, it would be Illinois and Minnesota. Then we have the southern states, which is the place to be, really, if you have a flatbed. Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Virginia all have more loads than there are trucks, more negotiating power. In the northeastern states, we have Delaware, Maryland, and Rhode Island, something that I haven't seen in the past 3 weeks, which is interesting. Not a ton of volume. If you look, there are only 111 loads currently, as of today, picking up in Rhode Island, but there are 103 trucks going in. Something you also have to consider is like a state like Maryland, right? We have 1,200 outbound loads versus 451 trucks. Maryland is very, very close to a place like Pennsylvania. So that volume, 1,836 trucks in Pennsylvania, will most likely be flocking to Maryland to pick up a load because the rates might be better there. Something to keep in mind. Now let's take a look at the map that TruckStop offers, which is a density map. If the area is darker, that means that there are more outbound loads versus inbound trucks. So basically we want to be in those areas that are a little bit darker. And we can see, of course, the south is the place to be with a flatbed, although there are some random market areas on the west coast, in the northeast, where it's pretty decent as well. But generally, South is still the place to be if you have a flatbed. Okay, now on to reefers, and we're going to start with the volume map. So as a reminder, the color shows us the change in volumes for reefers since last week. If the area is red, that means that volumes have dropped since last week. If it's blue, volumes increased. The height of a market area shows us volume in general, how much volume comes out of that particular market area. And we can see that on a big scale, volumes have dropped for reefers. There are some places in Iowa, in Illinois, South Carolina, Georgia, the Miami area market, the Connecticut market, where volumes have increased, but not by much. Now, something I want to bring your attention to, and I'm going to attach the video in a minute, is the California area, specifically Northern and Central California. We can see volumes decreased there. But the thing is, we were driving down the 101 yesterday. We went from the 1 across to the 101 and down from Monterey. And the farmland is full of produce, lettuce, strawberries, everything, right? Now, I don't know the terminology for this, but the lands that I saw, they're either lush with produce or they're ready for something to be planted. You know, like when they're, I don't know what it's called, but basically it gave me hope. So I'm gonna attach the video right now so you can see what I saw. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this market, at least in Northern and Southern California, there will be a produce season. Now, unfortunately, I don't have anything to compare it to, but it looked pretty decent to me. There is going to be something to transport. Now, I don't know what the harvesting periods are for these different things, but I believe starting in May is when a lot of things start getting harvested. So again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm no expert on this. I was just happy to see that farmlands are actually growing something, and a lot of it. Okay, now on to rejections. Same concept. Blue means that the tender rejections increased from last week in that market area for reefers. Red means they decreased, and the height shows us how many tender rejections there are in general. What we can see is that there were increases in tender rejection rates for reefers in the Northeast, in the Northwest, especially the, well, I guess this is the Spokane market, not the Pendleton market, and Missouri, Dallas, there are portions of Minnesota and South Dakota, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida. So yeah, there are some increases. There are also some decreases, you know, in the Pendleton market, Idaho, Midwest, but it's pretty random, right? Some increases, some decreases. So the question is, where do you need to be next week if you have a reefer to grab those relatively better opportunities? So here's our map. The color shows us tender rejections. The bluer the place, the more tender rejections happen in that area. The height shows us volume, and what we want to see is a place where it has high volume and high tender rejection rates. So I have, as always, marked places where the tender rejection is over 10% for reefer. And what we can see is the Pendleton market is still a decent market, 12.14%, and the volume is at 21. Spokane is a new market that I haven't seen in a while here. The rejection is at 15.58%, but the volume is really low, 2.86. Now, then, of course, we have Bismarck, as always, 18% rejection, but the volume is so small, there's nothing to actually haul out of there. The Fargo market is better, 12.9 or 13% rejection, 8.23 volume, and a new market, Syracuse. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Syracuse, rejection is at 11.11%. The volume is lower, but I'm curious as to what happened here that the rejection rates went up above 10%. Now, what about the head haul index for reefers? The color shows us whether there are more trucks or loads in the market. If it is red, that means there are more trucks coming into that market than loads going out, which means not much negotiating power. If it's blue, like California, there are more loads, outbound loads going out than trucks coming in. So there's not going to be there's going to be pretty much loose capacity there, so more negotiating power. For the most part, it's kind of pink, the map, which means there's overcapacity in a lot of areas. But a place like California doesn't have enough trucks compared to loads. Dallas is a pretty interesting market. The Midwestern states, I mean, not all of them, there's some red here, they have more loads going out than trucks coming in. Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. The Northeast is dead, overcapacity. Florida, overcapacity. But yeah, nothing outstanding here, but there are places where there are more loads than there are trucks. Okay, now for the drivein, starting with volumes. Again, as a reminder, color shows us whether volumes increased or decreased from last week. Blue means an increase, red means a decrease. And the height shows us general volume for driveins in that area. So what can we see? We can see a lot of gray, which means no change in volume. We can see some blue, especially, I mean, in the eastern portion of the US, right? The eastern portion is where there are a little bit more volume increases, as well as Nevada and Southern California. There are decreases more to the west. It looks like if we divide it in half, to the west and the southern states. So it's kind of up in the air, some volume increases, some decreases. But the most important part is tender rejections, right? We want to see whether loads are getting rejected and ending up on the spot market. This map is something that I like to see. Blue means an increase in tender rejections, red means a decrease. And we can see that it's a pretty blue map for driveins. Of course, there are some places, especially in the Midwest and the South, where there was a decrease in tender rejections. But I mean, look at Wisconsin, even the western states, not California, but Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Florida, the Northeast. Yeah, in Michigan, look at that. There is an increase in tender rejection rates, which means that more loads will be ending up on the load board than last week in these blue market areas, increasing the spot market volume and perhaps also increasing the rates together with the volume. Now, the question is, where do you need to go if you have a drivein? So here we have that same map as I have for a reefer. Unfortunately, there are only two market areas that have a tender rejection rate of over 10%, and that's the North Platte, Nebraska market, but the volume is only at 2.8, so not much to choose from. And Green Bay, Wisconsin, 17 or almost 18% rejection, and the volume is insane. But we saw on the previous map that the rejection rate there really increased. So Wisconsin is a good area. Now, the West Coast is getting a little bit better than last week. Still not a place to be if you have a drivein. So basically, if I still had a drivein that was actually operational, I'd probably stay in the Midwest and Texas if I still had the drivein. Finally, the head haul for the drivein. And again, as always, red means that there is overcapacity in that market. There are more trucks delivering in that market than there are loads coming out. Blue means the opposite. And what we can see is that, I mean, it's all over the place, but the map is pretty much red or pink. I don't think it's as bad as it was last week, which is awesome, but there is still overcapacity when it comes to driveins. Now, Southern California, the blue market right here, there are more loads going out than there are trucks delivering to that market, which is good. The Southeast, the Pennsylvania area, let's see, Dallas, Midwest, some states, there is more volume than there is capacity, which is good. There's still overcapacity, so we're still waiting for that capacity to exit the market to drive those rates up a little bit. All right, now let's talk about trucks in the market. And basically this shows us driver and carrier behavior, not capacity. Let's see how it changed from last week. And basically what we can see is blue means trucks entered that market over the past week. Red means that more trucks left those markets. Now, last week, I believe the southern states were very blue, which means that a ton of capacity went into the southern market. Now it's the northwest and the west coast and the plains, basically, northeast and the northern states. So everyone kind of left the southern market and flocked to the north and to the sides. Maybe those that flocked here found a better paying load going to the north or going, of course, to Washington. It pays better, and they're looking at the gross income, those long loads. But yeah, not much rhyme or reason here other than just observing behavior. Last week, everyone was here. Everyone left the northern states. Now everyone kind of spread out and left the southern states. Now let's take a look at diesel prices. And diesel is kind of bouncing up and down. So here we are today. Currently, the diesel prices are $4.25 per gallon on average, according to truck stops. Over the past over the past month, it has been bouncing up and down. Yeah, I don't know what is. Do you love my arrows? Those are horrific. But yeah, diesel has been kind of up and down, up and down. Currently, it's on its way down, which means in a couple of days, it's going to bounce back up again if we trust this pattern. But yeah, it's no longer on its way down, which is not good. And if we look at this chart right here, this diesel map, we can see there are, again, more and more green squares popping up. I will attach all of these down below so you guys can see. But yeah, more and more market areas are experiencing an increase in diesel prices, unfortunately. So to summarize, I am very, very happy to see that those tender rejections are trending higher than they did 1.5 weeks ago or so, that they're not going below that point. Although we did see that the NTIL, the National Truckload Index for line haul only, basically the spot market rates, have decreased by 1 cent since last week. And we have also seen that the spread between contract and spot rates has increased since Monday. Monday is when I showed you guys the contract versus spot spread. So that is probably due to the spot market still being on a downward trajectory when it comes to rates. I also have to say that I'm really happy, and it was a highlight for me from this mini vacation, is the farmlands. The fact that a lot of them are either, it seems like they're prepped for planting, growing things. Again, I am not an expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that right now, this is definitely not my forte, but it was wonderful to see that so many of those farmlands are lush with produce. And I was so excited to see lettuce, because everyone has been talking about the fact that lettuce is underwater. Doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it. It's definitely not underwater. It looked pretty decent. So this was something that I really wanted to share with you guys, because we're all hoping, all of us, regardless of our equipment type, that those produce loads start going out, that the produce season will kick in, volumes will start going up, and that will drive the spot market rates higher. So I'm here to say that unfortunately, I don't have anything to compare what I saw to. I don't know what it looked like 2 or 3 years ago when we had a decent produce season. But from what I saw, yeah, there's going to be an uptick in volume, because someone has to transport those fields and fields and fields and fields of produce. Now, the question is, when is it going to happen? From what I have read, and again, I'm not an expert here, so if you guys know, help me out. From what I have heard, May is the time where some of these things start getting harvested. I don't know. I don't know when it's going to kick in, but I'm hoping to see some produce volumes enter the market starting May, if what I read was true. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new, and I will see some of you, maybe all of you, at the live this Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. See you guys then.